I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Steve, and I've been married to Lisa for nearly 8 years now. We met when I was just out of college, and honestly, I thought we had a good thing going. She was smart, beautiful, confident, at least, that's what she seemed to be. But looking back, I should have seen the signs that something was off, that she was never quite as genuine as she pretended. Our relationship was pretty typical at first. We'd go out, have fun, and settle into the usual routine. I was focused on building my business, which was growing steadily, and Lisa was supportive. At least I thought she was. She'd always say she was proud of me, that she loved me, and that everything was fine. But I started noticing little things. She became more protective of her phone, always sneaking looks at it when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Little comments about how busy she was and how she needed alone time. Nothing too obvious, just enough to plant some doubts. I brushed it off, told myself I was paranoid. Then came the signs I can't ignore anymore. Her phone started ringing more often during the day, and she'd take those calls in the bathroom or the closet. She started dressing up more often, especially when she was going out with her friends. She'd get this overly confident attitude, sometimes even bitchy, like she was trying to push me away. I remember one night she snapped at me for asking about her day, said I was being clingy and insecure. That was strange because I'd never been the jealous type or overly possessive. I just wanted to know she was okay, but she flipped it around and made me feel guilty for caring. Things got worse when she started canceling plans last minute, saying she was busy with work or tired. But I could see her looking at her phone in secret again, and her excuse about needing me time started to feel hollow. Then, just a few weeks ago, I saw something that floored me completely. I was at a conference downtown, an industry event I had been preparing for months. Lisa was supposed to be there with me, but she had to cancel last minute for some family thing I didn't think much about it at the time, honestly, because I was caught up in my keynote speech, trying to stay focused. But during the break, I decided to check her social media because I had a gut feeling, and what I found made my stomach drop. There was a picture she had posted that showed her in a hotel room. Not just any hotel, but the one where the conference was being held. The caption was some snarky comment about networking and getting that intel, but the real kicker was the guy she was with. His name is Mark. He's my biggest industry rival. They were sitting close, smiling like they known each other for years. And I could see the hotel room in the background, the same one I was supposed to be in with her at that very moment. That's when it hit me. She wasn't gathering intel like she claimed. She was cheating on me right under my nose in the same hotel where I was giving my speech. I remember feeling this rush of disbelief, then pure rage. I even felt this sick sense of betrayal that she could do this while I was out there, trying to work and make us a better life. I couldn't believe she'd do something so blatantly disrespectful, so cruel. And Mark, I've known him for years, and I never thought he'd stoop this low. It's like the universe was mocking me. I kept staring at that picture, trying to process what I'd just seen, trying to find some logic or reason that would make sense of it. That was the moment I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't just let this go, not after everything. But deep down, I knew the confrontation wouldn't be easy. Lisa's the type to lie her way out of anything. She's good at it. She's manipulative, bitchy when cornered, and she always has a way of turning things around to make herself look innocent. Still, I had the evidence, and I was determined to get some answers. I remembered the hotel staff confirming that she was meeting someone, Mark, they said, every single day during the conference. It wasn't just some innocent business meeting, as she tried to spin it. So I waited, stewing in my own anger and heartbreak, trying to figure out what to do next. I knew I couldn't just accuse her without proof, and I also knew this wasn't going to be a clean resolution. Lisa was the type to deny everything, call me crazy, or worse, gaslight me into questioning my own sanity. But I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it, not after catching her in the act. She'd been lying, cheating, and playing me for a fool. I don't know what I expected, really. Maybe some tearful confession or her begging for forgiveness, but I wasn't naive enough to believe that anymore. This was just the beginning. I could feel it. The moment I saw that picture, everything changed. I remember standing there, staring at my phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My first instinct was disbelief. No, she's not stupid enough to do this, not in the hotel where I was giving my speech, not with Mark of all people. But the evidence was right there, glaring at me. It was as clear as day, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. My mind was racing, trying to find a way to process it, to make sense of how she could betray me like this. I spent the next few hours in a daze, trying to keep calm but failing miserably. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing, so I decided I had to confront her. I waited until she was home, kept my cool, and called her out directly. I told her I knew everything, about her meeting with Mark, about the hotel, about her lies. Her reaction was instant and infuriating. She looked at me with this bitchy smirk, rolled her eyes, and started spinning some bullshit about misunderstandings and innocent meetings. She said she was gathering competitive intelligence, like that was some noble reason to cheat on me in a hotel room with a rival. I could feel my blood boiling. I told her she was full of shit, that I had proof she was screwing him, that she was lying through her teeth. And then she just started sneering, saying I was overreacting, that I was insecure, that it's not what it looks like. Yeah, right. I'd seen her in the hotel room, smiling with him, and her excuses didn't hold water. She told me she was just playing the game, that Mark was just a business associate, but I knew better. I knew she was lying, probably trying to save her ass, trying to make me doubt myself. It was so typical of her to twist everything around, to turn herself into the victim. The worst part, her tone. She was so bitchy about it, like I was the one ruining everything. She called me paranoid, crazy even, told me I was imagining things, that I was jealous and insecure because I couldn't handle her success or her independence. But none of that mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was that she'd been unfaithful, and she'd done it so brazenly, so blatantly, right in front of my face. I could feel this mixture of hurt and anger boiling up inside me. It was like I'd been hit by a truck, but I was still standing. I told her I needed some space to think. I didn't shout and I didn't scream, at least not then. I just quietly told her I was done, that I needed to leave and figure out what the hell I was going to do with this mess. She kept throwing her little tantrum, calling me overreacting, saying I was making a mountain out of a molehill, but I did care. I saw her true face that day, bitchy, manipulative, and completely selfish. She didn't even try to deny it anymore. Her silence was her admission. That night was the hardest of my life. I couldn't sleep, kept replaying everything in my head. All the moments I'd missed, all the times I'd brushed off her strange behavior. I felt betrayed, stupid for trusting her, for thinking we had something real. I kept asking myself, how could she do this? How could she so casually screw around with my biggest rival, not caring about what it would do to me? She always played the victim, always made herself out to be the innocent one, but that day I saw her for what she really was. A liar, a bitch, and a cheat. I started thinking about what comes next. This wasn't just some fling. I was married to her, and she had thrown that all away for some fleeting affair. I knew I had to decide whether I could forgive her, whether I even wanted to. But deep down, I knew that trust, once broken this badly, was almost impossible to fix. Still, I wondered if there was a way to salvage whatever was left of what we had, or if I should just cut my losses and walk away. That's when I made my mind up. I was done. No more excuses, no more hiding. I'd confront her again and then figure out what to do from there. The betrayal had cut so deep I was starting to question everything, my judgment, my feelings, even my worth. How could someone I loved so much do something so cruel? I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. I'd never felt anything like this before. The shock, the devastation, the burning anger. And yet, amidst all that chaos, I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to let her get away with it. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I'd spent the night tossing and turning, replaying every moment, every word, trying to find clarity in the chaos. The house felt colder than usual, like the walls themselves were closing in on me. I knew I couldn't ignore what I'd seen or what I felt. I had to act, but I also needed to think carefully about how to approach this, because once I confronted her again, there was no turning back. I decided to sit her down face to face and get everything out in the open. No more hiding. No more pretending this was just a misunderstanding. I called her at work and told her I needed to talk, asking her to come home early. When she finally arrived, she had that usual bitchy smirk, like she thought she could brush everything off with her bullshit attitude. I didn't let her get away with it. I laid out the evidence, her social media post, the hotel staff confirmation, my own suspicions, and watched her squirm. She tried to deny it at first, saying I was reading too much into things, but I cut her off. I told her I wasn't stupid. I knew she was cheating and she could stop the lies right then and there. That's when she snapped. Her voice got sharp, icy, and her eyes flashed with anger. She started calling me paranoid, accusing me of controlling her, of being possessive and insecure. She insisted she was just gathering intelligence for the business, that Mark was just a colleague, and that I was blowing everything out of proportion. She even had the audacity to say I was the one who was making her do this, that I was pushing her away. Honestly, I'd never seen her so bitchy, so manipulative. It was like she was trying to gaslight me into doubting my own judgment. I could feel my blood boiling again, but I stayed calm, mostly because I knew if I lost my temper, I'd give her what she wanted: control. I told her she wasn't fooling anyone anymore. Her excuses were weak, and I wasn't going to be played that way. I said I was done believing her lies, that I'd seen enough. I told her I was leaving, not necessarily for good yet, but enough to give me some space to figure things out. I told her I didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear her bullshit anymore. That was the moment I realized she was furious. She started screaming, calling me possessive, jealous, and a bunch of other names. She told me I was ruining everything, that she didn't owe me an explanation, that she'd do whatever she wanted. That bitchy tone, that snide attitude, it was like she was trying to make me feel guilty for catching her. I just looked at her and said, "You're done. I'm done listening to your lies." I knew pulling away was the only way to stop her from manipulating me further. I grabbed my stuff and left the house, feeling like I'd just escaped some trap I'd walked right into. For a moment, I was angry at myself for trusting her so blindly, but mostly I was just hurt, crushed by the realization that the woman I loved had betrayed me so easily. Now, I was sitting in my car outside, trying to breathe and figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train, and I kept replaying her words, her bitchy smirk, her accusations, her lies. I wondered how someone I'd shared so much with could turn into this cold, manipulative stranger in such a short time, and I kept asking myself, was I even capable of forgiving her? Did I want to? Or was this the end of everything we built? I knew I couldn't just go back to normal, not after this. The trust was shattered, and I was starting to realize that some betrayals cut so deep they leave scars that never fully heal. Still, I had to decide whether this was worth fighting for, or if I should cut my losses and walk away. I'd always believed marriage was about honesty, about being there for each other through thick and thin, but her actions had proven otherwise. And the worst part, I still loved her, even now, despite everything. That's what makes this so damned complicated. I never expected to be here in this situation, questioning everything. But I guess love and betrayal don't usually go hand in hand. And right now, I was trying to figure out if I had the strength to rebuild, or if I was better off letting go forever. The days that followed were the hardest I've ever experienced. I stayed away from the house, not because I wanted to run away from what I saw, but because I needed space, to breathe, to think, to piece together what my next move should be. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smirking in that hotel room, her face so full of contempt and indifference, like she didn't care about the damage she'd caused. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disappointment that burned inside me like no other pain I'd ever known. I kept asking myself how she could be so bitchy, so cold when I'd always been loyal and supportive. She had this way of making me feel like I was crazy for catching her, like I was the problem, not her. She spun her web of lies so smoothly that I almost believed her, until I saw the evidence, until I saw her true face. It's one thing to suspect, it's another to find out for sure, and that reality hit me like a wrecking ball. She'd been cheating on me openly, shamelessly, while I was working my ass off to build our future. And she had the nerve to lie about it, to deny everything, to accuse me of being insecure. I finally decided I needed to talk to someone, even if just to hear another perspective. So I called my best friend, Mark, the guy I'd trusted for years. I told him everything, laying out the evidence and how I felt. To my surprise, he was just as shocked as I was, maybe even more. Mark admitted he'd known Lisa for a while, knew she had a bitchy side, but he'd never guessed she'd stoop this low. He told me I deserved better, that no one should put up with a spouse who cheats and manipulates. At that moment, I felt a little less alone, like I had someone who understood how deep this betrayal cut. But then I wondered, how did I miss all the signs? How did I miss that she was capable of being so cold, so calculating? I was so caught up in our routine, in her lies about gathering intelligence, that I never saw the real her. Maybe I was blind, or maybe I just refused to see what was right in front of me. Either way, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to do something, something decisive, because I couldn't go on living under the weight of her lies and deceit. That's when I decided I'd confront her one more time. Not to beg, not to plead, just to get everything out in the open, to hear what she had to say, if she had anything left to say at all. I set up a meeting at a neutral place, a coffee shop nearby. I told her I wanted to talk and she agreed, but her tone was bitchy, dismissive, almost like she didn't think I was worth her time. When she arrived, she was dressed to impress, looking like she hadn't a care in the world. That just made my blood boil even more. How could she be so selfish, so indifferent to the pain she'd caused? I started by laying out everything I knew: her hotel room mark, the social media post, the hotel staff confirmation. She snapped her head back, trying to deny it all again, but I cut her off. I told her I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore, that I had the proof and I wasn't going to be played for a fool. Her face got this bitchy, contemptuous look, like she was better than me, like she was entitled to do whatever she wanted. She spat out some nonsense about protecting her career and doing what was necessary to gather intel. I couldn't believe the audacity. She was basically saying she had to cheat, had to lie, to keep her job and her reputation. I told her that was bullshit, that her gathering intelligence was just an excuse to screw around in hotel rooms with her rival. I said I was done tolerating her lies and manipulations. I told her I was leaving, that I'd had enough of her bitchy attitude and her bullshit. I felt a strange sense of relief, like I was finally taking control of my life again. But that relief was short-lived. She just sneered, called me jealous and possessive, and said I was trying to control her. She said I was the one who was insecure, not her. That she was just doing what she had to for her career, and I was the one making everything into a huge deal. I looked her in the eyes and told her she could play her manipulative games all she wanted, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I was done with her lies, her bullshit, her bitchy attitude. I told her I'd be moving out, that I'd file for divorce if I had to, that I wasn't going to be her punching bag, her fool, her doormat anymore. Her sneer deepened, and she spat out some last derisive comment about how I was weak, that I'd never survive without her. That's when I knew I had to leave, not just her, but this whole toxic cycle she dragged me into. Walking away from her that day felt like breaking free from a nightmare I'd been trapped in for months. I didn't feel victorious exactly, but I felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd spent so long trying to hold onto this illusion of a happy marriage, but it was all just a facade. She was a bitchy, manipulative user who only cared about herself, about her career, her image, her damn reputation. And I was the fool who thought I could fix her, fix us. But I couldn't. I see that now. I've started packing my things, making plans to move out, to get away from her toxic grip. It's going to be tough, very tough, but I know I have to do it. The biggest lesson: trust is fragile. Betrayal cuts deeper than I ever thought possible. And sometimes, the person you love most can turn out to be the biggest liar and manipulator. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I can't go back to that mess. I need to rebuild, find myself again, and hope that someday I'll forget this pain. For now, I just want to get out of this nightmare and finally breathe again. The move out was a whirlwind. Honestly, I didn't have much choice but to get away fast. One day I was in her house, and the next I was packing up what little I could. I told her I was leaving for a while, needed space, needed clarity, and she just shrugged like it was no big deal. That bitchy smirk she always had was still there, like she was already planning her next move. It struck me how she could be so indifferent, so totally disconnected from the chaos she caused. I remember loading up my car with the last of my things, feeling like I was leaving a part of myself behind. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal, though that cut deep. It was realizing how much I'd ignored, how I'd let her manipulate me into thinking I was overreacting or being paranoid. The truth was, I'd been blind for too long. She'd been lying, cheating, sneering at me behind my back, and I'd almost let her get away with it. Almost. As I drove away from what used to be our home, I felt a strange mixture of relief and despair. Relief because I was finally out of her toxic grip, and despair because I was alone, really alone for the first time in years. I couldn't help but think about all the moments I'd missed, her bitchy attitude, her manipulative games, and I hated myself a little for not seeing it sooner. But then again, how could I? She played her role so well, like a master manipulator. Everything was a lie, a facade she kept up to keep me fooled. That first night alone was rough. I stayed in a hotel trying to sleep but failing miserably. My mind kept spinning, replaying all her bitchy comments, her sneering smirk, that hotel room with Mark. I kept asking myself how someone I loved could turn into this cold, selfish stranger. I felt hurt, angry, and most of all betrayed. I realized that I'd been trusting her blindly, believing in this perfect image she created. But now I knew better. She was just a bitchy, manipulative user who only cared about herself, about her career, her reputation, her game, and I was the fool who never saw it coming. The days that followed were even worse. I stayed away from everyone, trying to keep my head clear. I needed to figure out what I wanted, whether to fight for a divorce or try to salvage whatever dignity I had left. Honestly, I was so numb I couldn't even think straight. Every time I looked at my phone, I hesitated, wondering if she'd call, if she'd try to manipulate me again. She's that kind of person, good at playing the victim, good at making you doubt yourself. But I knew I couldn't let her do that anymore. Eventually, I sat down and started writing out my options. Part of me still wanted to believe there was a way back, that maybe, just maybe, she'd come to her senses and own up to everything. But deep down, I knew that was wishful thinking. Her sneering attitude, her bitchy comments, they told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't going to change. Not now. Not ever. So I decided to file for divorce. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the only one that made sense. I couldn't keep living in this toxic environment with her manipulating and lying to my face. I had to protect myself, my sanity, my dignity. The legal process started and I hired a lawyer. It's going to take time and it'll be messy, but I've come to accept that I deserve better than her bitchy attitude and her constant lies. The biggest lesson I've learned from all this: never ignore the signs. Never let someone manipulate you into thinking their lies are worth tolerating. Trust your instincts, even if it means facing some harsh truths. Love isn't enough when the other person is selfish and manipulative. Sometimes walking away is the only option, and it's the bravest thing you can do. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I can finally start rebuilding my life, free from her toxicity. And honestly, that thought is what keeps me going. Looking back now, I realize how much this whole nightmare changed me. I used to believe in happily ever after, in loyalty, in honesty. That illusion got shattered the day I saw her in that hotel room, smiling with Mark, pretending everything was fine while her betrayal was right in front of my eyes. It's like I was living in some kind of delusion, thinking she was the woman I married, someone I could trust with my life. Turns out, she was just playing a role, one that included being a bitchy, manipulative user who only cared about herself. Going through this has been one of the ugliest experiences of my life, but I've learned some hard lessons. Never ignore the signs of betrayal, no matter how insignificant they seem. Never let someone manipulate you into doubt or guilt, especially when their actions prove they don't respect or value you. And above all, love isn't enough. It's not enough to overlook the lies, the manipulations, or the bitchy attitude just because you want things to work. Sometimes, walking away is the bravest, healthiest choice you can make, because staying often means accepting a version of yourself you don't recognize anymore. This whole ordeal has left me scarred, but also stronger. I'm rebuilding my life from scratch, focusing on myself, my career, my mental health, my future. I look at everything now through a different lens. I see the warning signs I ignored before, and I'm more cautious, more aware. I've realized that I deserve someone who respects me, who's honest and who values loyalty. No more of this bitchy attitude, no more manipulative lies. I want genuine, real love, something she was never capable of giving. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, my advice is simple. Trust your instincts, listen to your gut, and don't be afraid to walk away. You might love the person, but if they're betraying you emotionally, physically, or in any way, you owe it to yourself to get out. No one is worth sacrificing your dignity or your happiness. You can rebuild from the ruins, no matter how devastating it seems now. Time really does heal, and one day, you'll look back and realize that the pain was just a chapter in your story, not the whole story. And as for me, I'm finally at peace with myself. I've learned that a relationship built on lies and manipulations isn't worth a second chance. I've learned that being alone isn't the worst thing in the world. Sometimes it's the best thing. I've learned that I am stronger than I thought, and I don't need someone bitchy and manipulative to define me. I'll move forward, wiser and more guarded, but also more hopeful. Because if I've learned anything from all this, it's that life goes on, and sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the best future.